Alright class. Remember that in order to think like a responsible economist, one must always beware of the secondary effects. So if you are thinking to yourself, I don't understand anything Professor Haymond is talking about, do not fear. The important idea presented today is simply the fact that secondary effects do exist. This means that economic actions often generate indirect as well as direct effects. Not acknowledging secondary effects is one of the most prevalent economic errors because these effects are often entirely different from the initial direct effects. Unfortunately, this mistake is ridiculously common among our seemingly brilliant politicians today. But don't let that get you down. Over the weekend, remember the concept of secondary effects. See everybody on Tuesday.
Hey Professor Haymond, what are you doing here at the park?
Oh hey, Caleb. I'm just out for my afternoon jog.
Really? You jog, in a suit?
Absolutely. There's no better way to jog. Why are you at the park?
Well, I'm on my way to an interview. You see, I was fired from my job as a result from the increase in minimum wage. My employer cut several jobs to cover the salary cost increase, which resulted in my termination.
Wow. That is very unfortunate. Sorry to hear that. However, that is a great example of what we have discussed in class.
Are you talking about secondary effects? How so?
Well, before we can understand the indirect effects, we must take a look at the direct effects. For example, in 2009, the minimum wage was raised from $6.55 to $7.25. Workers were given more money per hour of work. When the minimum wage was raised, people were focused on the direct effects in that workers would earn more money. That's a good thing, right?
I guess so, but that doesn't explain why I lost my job.
Well, that is when the secondary effects come into play. While earning more money is great news for the workers, it only increases wages expenses for businesses. You see, this is especially true for small struggling businesses. The businesses will be forced to cut hours, and the unemployment rate will rise because businesses will not be able to pay all of their workers.
So then why did we decide to raise the minimum wage?
Well, you see, Caleb, politicians assumed that raising the minimum wage would help people living below the poverty line, when instead, it did the opposite. When the wages increase, the cost is passed on to the consumer because businesses must raise prices in order to make up for their higher wages. So really, the good intentions of politicians are not enough. They are focused on the direct effects rather than the long-term secondary effects. Does that make sense?
Actually, yes. That makes perfect sense. It's frustrating that politicians have such a great influence on the economy, huh?
You're telling me. Remember, Caleb, the key to becoming an educated economist and citizen is to always consider the secondary effects.
That was helpful, thanks. Well, I better go. Have a good run in your suit.
Thanks, Caleb. Good luck on your interview. I'm off to the mall to look for a new power tool at Sears Hardware. See you later. Well, time to buy my sand compressor 3000.
Hey Jeff. Oh dude. Sweet sand compressor 3000.
Hey, Ron Paul. What are you doing here?
I'm here picking up paint to give the walls a new coat.
Are you selling your house in this terrible housing market?
Don't get me started on the housing market.
Actually, I'd like to hear your thoughts. I'm teaching my class about secondary effects and I personally believe the recent housing crisis is a perfect example. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh Jeff. I completely agree with you. The government had good intentions to make it easier to buy houses. However, good intentions are not enough. They totally forgot about secondary effects. In fact, I predicted the housing crisis would strike in full force. In 2003 I said, and quote, "The special privileges granted to Fannie and Freddie have distorted the housing market by allowing them to attract capital they could not attract under pure market conditions. Like all artificially created bubbles, the boom in housing prices cannot last forever. When housing prices fall, homeowners will experience difficulty as their equity is wiped out. Furthermore, the holders of the mortgage debt will also have a loss. These losses will be greater than they would have otherwise been, had government policy not actively encouraged overinvestment in housing.
Wow, you predicted the future perfectly, dude. Through the housing market, we are experiencing secondary effects.
That's right, dude. Secondary effects are critical and an extremely important lesson in economics.
Preach it, brother. Great material for my next class.
Glad I could help. I need to pick up my paint now. Peace out.
Well, class, I hope you had a great weekend. I sure did. I picked up a new sand compressor 3000 at Sears Hardware and ran into my good friends, Caleb Nisley and Ron Paul. I was also able to see some real-life examples of secondary effects. A good way to make a wise decision is to follow the advice of Proverbs 15:22. Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed.